Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Seneca Beatty, and I am the Outreach and Technology Specialist for the Western Region TTA Center, a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone is happy and healthy at home. This conversation today is going to be very relevant to the situation that we are experiencing, and I want to wish everyone the best of health as we go forward. I'm going to be the moderator for today's webinar. Please be aware that this presentation is being recorded. We will post the recording on our website at anawestern.org. I'd also like to mention that there's going to be a lot of information presented today. We may run over our allotted hour time block. If you have additional questions, please reach out to your regional TTA center at any time. We have also included handouts with resources, contact information, and a copy of the slide set that you can download from your side control panel right now. During this presentation, you'll also have the chance to submit a question for our question and answer session. To do so, simply type your question into the Q&A or chat box on your side control panel at any time. We'd also like to encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we will work to address them as we go along. With that said, I'd like to welcome everyone. We are the Western Region, and we are the hosts for today. The Western Region is one of 4 regional training and technical assistance centers that are provided by ANA, the Administration for Native Americans. ANA promotes self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects, training, and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. ANA's vision is to see that Native communities are thriving. Today's webinar is on trauma, staying connected. It's a very relevant topic as we continue to face isolation together. The focus for today's webinar is to first understand how social isolation contributes to trauma for individuals and families, and then look at methods to combat isolation-related trauma. Finally, we'll transition into a community perspective and discuss community-based planning, what it is, and how it can continue while in isolation. During today's webinar, we'll be highlighting the tools already available to you and additional funding sources you may wish to consider. The resource document in your side control panel under handouts provides links to finding the tools and resources we're going to talk about today. In addition to myself, we are joined today by the Western Region Training Manager, Dan Van Otten, as well as our guest speaker, Dr. Beth Boyd. Dr. Boyd is an enrolled member of the Seneca Nation of Indians and a full professor in the Clinical Psychology doctoral program at the University of South Dakota. We're pleased to have her join us to discuss her insights into disaster mental health and the role COVID plays in our well-being. I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Beth to introduce themselves. Dan?
Please stay healthy. Hello, goodwill to you, and please stay healthy. My name's Dan. I live in Oregon. I've been the Western Regional Training Manager for a while, and I'm saying goodbye to you folks that I've worked with over the years. This will be my last webinar, I think. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I've valued the experience. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Beth today. And I've heard her before and am really impressed with the message she has. So Beth, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Dan and Jenica. Greetings. I greet you with a hearty handshake and a warm heart, and I'm glad that you all could be here today, and it's an honor to be here with you and share what I can about getting through this difficult time and getting ready to move forward in our lives again. So thank you.
Thank you to you both. I'm going to progress the slides here and turn it off to Beth before we continue, I just want to remind our two guest speakers to speak clearly and loudly. We have a few comments saying that the audio is not as clear as it could be. And with that, Beth, take it away.
Okay, please do let me know if I'm not speaking loud enough and so that you can understand. So today I'm going to talk about some of the mental health considerations of how we are experiencing this coronavirus and this sort of not before experienced situation. This is something that is new to all of us. It's affecting every one of us, and it does affect us in different ways. And so there are things that we should know in general about coping with the effects of this, and also things to know that may affect different people in different ways. And so I'll try to address some of these as we go along. And if you have questions even throughout, I'm happy to stop and answer questions wherever they are. But this, like I said, this is something that we've never seen before. It's on a scale that we haven't really dealt with in our lifetime. It has been affecting people around the world. We're hearing nonstop news about the way it has been affecting people, about deaths, about the uncertainty, about the stress that it is bringing to everyone who's experiencing it. So this is a novel coronavirus. It means it's generating the kind of stress that we haven't seen before. It's also invisible, and so that always makes a threat or a crisis a little bit more complicated when we can't see. For example, when there's a hurricane building in the Gulf or off the coast, we can watch it and we can track it and we can know exactly where it is, and we have lots of guesses about where it's going to go, but at least we can see it and we know what it is that we're facing, and we can make the kinds of preparations that we might need to make and the decisions that we need to make in advance of it. One of the difficulties with this situation now is that this virus is invisible, it's unseen, and so it makes that fear and uncertainty a little bit stronger. And those emotions can be really overwhelming and cause strong emotions in both adults and children. So one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is this term that we call social distancing. I think that helps to confuse us a little bit because it's really about physical distancing. I think in the beginning, people just, began to feel really isolated from each other because they were really socially distancing, and that's not really the goal of what we're trying to do. But the physical distancing is really important, and keeping space in between people, staying 6 feet or 2 meters from other people around you, avoiding large gatherings, staying out of crowded spaces. Some of these things are not too difficult to do, but other things are, especially in communities like ours, where that's what we do, is we gather in communities. We eat together in communal spaces. We gather for different kinds of events and celebrations. And so sometimes that feels very difficult to be able to pull off. And so those are things that cause some extra stress for people when we're now doing things in ways that we're not used to doing. But still, I want to make the point that it is still about physical distancing and not social distancing so much. We need to remember that as human beings, we are social beings, and so we really can't just cut ourselves off socially from each other. We need each other. We depend on each other. There are others that are depending on us, and allowing ourselves to get isolated really increases that stress and anxiety that we might be feeling. And so what can we do when we're supposed to be maintaining that physical distance? Really recognizing the impact of that isolation and loneliness. And when you feel yourself feeling cut off from the world, or that you haven't seen or talked to someone except for your computer, maybe, which is the kind of being a professor, that's what I end up doing, is talking to my computer all day long, and sometimes feeling like I just need to reach out to a human being. And so when we recognize that we're feeling that way, I think it's important to realize it's time to make a real contact, maintain those social networks that are so important to us on a regular basis. It's important to try to keep some sort of daily routine. It's true that our routines may be very much different than they were a few months ago, but we can make a new routine for this time, and maybe we won't keep that same routine when we go back to whatever normal is going to be. We may have to find yet another routine at that time, but trying to give ourselves something of a routine so that we can predict what the day is going to be like and what we're going to need to do. And the more we can do that, the less it feels like we're just being swept along by something we don't have any control of. So we want to make sure that we grab a hold of those things that we can be in control of, like creating a new routine. And then paying special attention to what your needs are. Do you need to just rest for a minute? Do you need to get away from that computer? Or do you need to stop hearing all the news about this? Or do you need to just reach out and talk to somebody? Do you need to reach out and make sure that people that are in your social network are okay? Just making sure that you're touching base with people. So engaging in healthy activities. I know that for me, I've had to really remind myself to get up and stretch and move around instead of just staying in my chair in front of this computer all day. I need to stop and I need to take a breath and go outside for a minute, or take a walk, or just pay attention to what it is that it feels like I need at the moment. It's during times of stress, it's sometimes hard to pay attention to what it is that you need. And of course, that means things like regular sleep, good sleep, and good nutrition, and all those kinds of things too. As COVID-19 presents these new and unique challenges, many of us are working remotely. We're teleworking full time, probably for the first time for many of us. And so it does mean isolation from coworkers and friends and people that we see on a regular basis. The disruption of that adds to daily stress and anxiety. I know I was sharing with Dan and Jenica that I had the stress leading up to this today that my internet will go out, or so all of these technological things that I don't really know how to fix, things that are outside of my control. And so those things kind of add to the stress, having to do new kinds of tasks, or having to do tasks in a different kind of way. And in many cases, it's much, there are many more steps to doing the work that we're used to doing. And so just getting through all of those little things that seem to take up so much extra time, and finding new ways to care for our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. There are the ways that we are used to in our regular life. Now we're having to find some new and different ways. Some things we can continue exactly as it was, some things we cannot. And I think we need to look forward to a time when things may be even different again. And so we'll have to find new ways in our new normal kind of situation. We are making use of virtual tools like Zoom to check in face to face. I had to really get used to this, because it just always reminded me of Hollywood Squares. that I'm sitting here looking at this Hollywood Squares kind of screen with all these people on. But I'm getting used to it, and we can get used to some of these things. I'm even finding that some things make more sense this way, and maybe some of these things we will keep as we go forward. But the bottom line is that social distancing does not mean social isolation. And so we can reach out, we can Zoom with our family members. We've had some really interesting, in my family, some really interesting family Zoom meetings where we spent probably 2/3 of the time trying to explain to my mother how to get on. And I think she's finally getting it. So those have been fun with all of our family and extended family on calls. And so finding those ways to stay connected. Some of the common stress responses that people have in situations like this, fear, worry, worrying about health. I mean, I know when you listen to some of the news reports, it's really hard not to end up feeling really worried about people maybe in another area where they're having a harder time, or just being concerned. What is this going to mean, and who is the vulnerable people, and how will we keep them safe? So that's a normal thing. This situation is not normal. This is not something that we usually deal with, and so having reactions of fear or worry or anxiety, those are all healthy. I'm not healthy. What I'm saying, they're normal. Those are normal, and they don't necessarily have to be unhealthy as long as we're keeping our eye on them and monitoring them and finding ways to cope with those feelings and not let them overcome us. It might mean some changes in sleep or eating patterns. You've heard about this term, probably they're calling quarantine, the quarantine 5 or 15 or however much it's going to end up being, but it's talking about being at home all day and having access to our refrigerators and things, and people just sort of snacking all day instead of their usual eating routines. But there may be, some people might just have lost their appetite too and just aren't interested in eating as much, or having difficulty falling asleep, or finding themselves wanting to sleep all the time to sort of escape the situation. So those kinds of changes might happen. We might have difficulty concentrating. I know early on in this, many of my students talked about just having a hard time concentrating in ways that they hadn't experienced before, with nothing being in person, everything being, over some sort of remote technology. And it is hard to concentrate, especially if you're worried about a family member, especially if you're worried about your own health. It is difficult to concentrate. Some people have had worsening in their chronic health issues, like high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma. All of these things are susceptible to stress. And that I'm not even talking about being affected by the virus itself. I'm just talking about the stress that we're feeling. And so it's important to try to get as much control as we can of those levels of stress that make us that make our hypertension worse, or our asthma worse, or make our blood sugars out of control, and those kinds of things. And people also experience a worsening in mental or behavioral health conditions that they may already be dealing with. So if you've already been battling depression or anxiety, a situation like this and the isolation that people might feel and the extra stress can make those situations worse. So that's important to know for ourselves, that if we're dealing with those conditions, we need to make sure to get extra supports during this time. If we know someone else who is dealing with those conditions, reaching out and offering support to them and making sure that they're okay and that they're staying safe and as healthy as they can during this situation. That's true with the use of alcohol and tobacco and other kinds of substances as well. During times of stress and crisis, the use of that tends to go up. And so if we or people we know are susceptible in those areas, we need to be monitoring, be extra careful, and be extra supportive in reaching out to people and offering other kinds of support. Remember that that tobacco and caffeine are drugs too, and those are things that can have an impact on our overall health and coping. Drinking, coffee nonstop all day long is going to have an impact on how anxious you end up feeling and how well you feel like you're coping with things. So those are things to think about too. And then there are, feelings of grief and feelings of guilt. Many people have talked about feeling guilty that they can't do more to help, that they're stuck in their homes, or that they're not able to reach out to family members that they know need them, or community members that they know need help, or that they just can't do more in the overall response, and so have feelings of guilt about that. Or grief. There's so much grief right now. There have been so many people lost during this time. There's so much that we can look around us and see that there has been losses in so many different ways, and even the loss of that illusion that we have of safety. If I do everything right and I'm living my life the right way and I'm being a good person, then bad things won't happen. And we sort of hold on to that idea that we're safe. And this thing has sort of turned the whole world upside down. And a lot of people are feeling just that loss of the sense of safety. I've heard many people talk about feeling like they're grieving and not even being sure of what it is that they're grieving. And so there are those very personal and physical kinds of losses that people are grieving, and then there's the loss of feelings of safety and feelings of support and being around people. So those are all very important to recognize and to be able to reach out to people who are feeling those. Sometimes people don't feel like they can voice those kinds of feelings because they haven't specifically lost a loved one. So why should they be feeling grief? But recognizing that people around us might be feeling that and helping them to put that into words can be really helpful. And remember that your response to stress varies based on who you are. Different people across the globe are feeling these same stresses, and they're expressing them in different ways. There are ways that we know from our cultures, from our communities, from our family ways of doing things. And so my way of expressing stress might not look like your way of expressing stress. And so it doesn't mean that one way is better or worse, that they're just different. And I think that's an important thing to recognize in people too. I'm trying to, oh, there we go. So fostering, did I skip a slide here? Yes, I did. That's what I was afraid of. Okay. So keeping stock of our emotional health is very important as we're practicing social distancing. One of the things that I like to say is sometimes what we need actually is mental distancing, and just taking a break every once in a while from watching the TV or reading the news or reading the stuff on the computer, because you can just get completely overwhelmed. There is a 24/7 constant stream of news reports, the things that are happening in one area and what they're projecting that's going to happen in another area and how long they're projecting it's going to happen. And I mean, sometimes it's just too much. Sometimes you just have to shut that off and give your mind a break. My favorite thing to do is go to Netflix and watch something as not serious as possible, just completely, shut off the whole news stream and not pay attention to it for a little while, just to give myself a break, or just sit outside and take some deep breaths and get away from all of the technology sometimes, go for a walk, those kinds of things. Take time to unwind and to do some activities that you enjoy, that you can still do. Connect with other people. It's a good time to just call somebody you haven't talked to in a while. Turn to somebody that you trust and talk about how all of this is making you feel. And another thing that I would say is make sure that you're getting news that you can trust. That, because there's all kinds of speculation going on. There's all kinds of opinions being spoken. And so when you do tune into that stuff, make sure that you know that it's accurate information, because that's what we need really, is we need the accurate information that's going to tell us what we need to think about going forward and what's going to keep us safe and what's going to keep us healthy. And we could kind of skip through all the speculation and opinions and stuff. So that's one thing to kind of think about. We also need to take care of our physical health. Taking care of your body. I've said that and a little bit ago, taking the time to take deep breaths, stretch, meditate, be creative in how you exercise. I think one of the coolest things is what I've seen lately is some of the, the dance kinds of things that you can do. It's fun. And, maybe you're alone in your house and you could just let go and dance and not worry about it. Or maybe your whole family can join in and you can dance together. There's something about that physical movement that is healing and is brings our spirits up. Make sure to keep your immune system strong. Wash your hands a lot. Eat a balanced diet. Stay hydrated. And then prioritize the things that we've learned that are so important about personal hygiene. Covering your cough, avoiding contact with people who are not feeling well. Avoid touching your face, eyes, nose, and mouth. And the very minute I say that probably makes something on your face itch or feel like you need to touch it. That has been one of the most difficult things for people, is realizing how often we do touch our face. And then when you're absolutely trying not to touch your face, then your nose itches or your eyebrow itches or something, and it just feels like you just have to touch your face. But that's one of those things that we can it's a habit that we can change. It just takes some really focusing on it to do it. And of course, it's important to stay spiritually fit as well. Sometimes we forget this part, but this is so important. One thing to really focus on is there's so much about this situation that we don't have control of, that we have to be realistic about what we can control and what we can't, and then focus on the things that we can control. We can control our environment right around us. We can control whether we're inundated by news or whether we allow ourselves to take a break. There's those things we can control. And so that can help us to really accept the things that we have control over and accept the things that we don't. We will roll with whatever the punches are or whatever the situation brings. We can do this. We can adjust and adapt and be flexible. We might not like it sometimes and we might not want to, but if we accept that we can do that, it makes it a whole lot easier. Allow yourself the chance to grieve if you need to do that. Just some days I just feel the sadness, I guess, the loss, the kind of being separated from my kids who are across the country and just wishing I could be with them, or that they could come and visit, or, it's just, and sometimes I just have to sit and feel sorry for myself about that and grieve that a little bit and let it go. And then I can pick up the phone and call them and feel better, or whatever those things are. Sometimes you just got to give yourself the chance to go ahead and feel it. We could start a journal, a gratitude journal, where we keep track of all of the things that we really are thankful for, where we can reflect on what this is teaching us, where we can look at what in our lives what are we going to keep from this situation, what are we going to keep in our lives and continue going forward when this is done, what are the good things that we found from it, or use a journal to write, to document this. This is a historic time. It's something that's never happened before in our lifetime, and so writing down what that is, sort of keeping that journal of your thoughts and experiences during this time, and thinking about how that will be 5 years from now, or 20 years from now, when you're sharing it with your grandchildren. This is what it was like during that time. These are the things that I was thinking about and feeling. Make lists. I like making lists. It makes me feel better, because then I can cross things off my lists, and it makes me feel like I'm in control of something. So make lists. This is what I'm going to do today. This is what I'm going to do this week. These are the friends that I'm going to call this week. These are the things that I'm going to do to try to help people in some kind of way this week. And doing something for someone else sometimes is the best way for us to forget how miserable we might be. The minute you reach out and start thinking about how you can help somebody else, you forget about how bad you might have been feeling that day, and it makes you feel better. It makes them feel better too. Check in with old friends or neighbors that may feel isolated. You can stand in an elder's front yard and talk to them, while they stay at the door, just so they know that there are people still there and still checking on them, and still important in their lives, and there for them when they need them. And then I think it's important. We've really seen the examples of this during this coronavirus. Fear and anxiety can lead to social stigma, and stigma and discrimination occurs when this disease, when people associate a disease with a population or nationality. We've seen that across this country in many different ways, many different diseases. I don't know if some people remember the hantavirus, probably close to 20 years ago now, and how that stigmatized people in the Southwest. And this one is stigmatizing people from China, and people who are Asian Americans, and people who have had nothing to do with this, but people are being hurt by this. People are, discriminatory things are happening, social avoidance and rejection, even physical violence has been happening. Denials of things like healthcare and education and housing, those kinds of things have been happening to people. So it's really important to, when you hear that stigmatizing kind of language, to interrupt or to speak out against that kind of incorrect language or behaviors. Remembering that children don't really necessarily know how to express what they're feeling. We can absolutely know positively that they are feeling the additional stresses of this situation. Their usual routine has been interrupted. If they went to school before this, they're now stuck at home. If they're teenagers, we're really hearing about how they're not seeing their friends. there's so much about their routine that's been disrupted. And young children, you may think that they're so young that they don't really know the difference, but they can feel it. They can pick up what the emotional sort of valence is around them, and how if their caretaker is feeling stressed out and overwhelmed, they're feeling that, but they don't have the words to put to it. So it might be even more anxiety provoking. So you might see children being more clingy, more demanding. You might even see some going back to earlier kinds of behaviors that you haven't seen for a while. And that's all normal. That is something that happens in crisis situations. It happens when children are under stress. And so it's really important to give them the chances to express their feelings as much as you can. If they're young, helping them to draw pictures or play, what some of their feelings are, engaging them in creative activities, because they need to stretch their minds and creativity as well. Try to maintain as many familiar routines as you can. And if it's absolutely impossible to keep a familiar routine, create a new one that you do every day of this time period. It's amazing with little kids how much just having a story time, just sitting and reading a book or telling a story, how soothing and calming that could be, as you hold them and they feel safe. And make that a regular routine at a certain time of day, or make a new bedtime routine that can soothe them and help them go to sleep. And one thing that's really important is to make sure that you're monitoring their exposure to media, images, and language. You might think that they're so young that they're just playing and the TV's on in the background and they're not understanding or paying any attention, but they're picking it up. They're seeing the images, they're picking up the tone of the seriousness of things, and they don't really know what to do with that. And so making sure that that's not on all the time with them, and or doing some time where you just sit down and explain to them as best as you can what's going on, so that they have words to go with what they're experiencing around them. And in the same way, elders they may feel especially isolated during this time. They may feel more anxious and stressed. And sometimes that stress comes out in anger or feeling agitated. And sometimes it comes out in people just withdrawing and not being, not feeling very present in their situation. If elders have some cognitive decline, that might be even more intense because it's harder for them to understand what's going on. So making sure to give people, clear, practical information. They need to know the facts. We don't need to shelter them from what's actually happening, because they need to know the facts. But making sure that they understand and that you're giving clear communication and patient, because sometimes it takes both children and elders, a few times of hearing an explanation to really understand it. Let's be honest. It takes all of us a few times of hearing things when we're really stressed out. We might all need to hear it very patiently and clearly and concisely given to us when it's stressful information. Engage family members and other support networks to be able to look in on elders and to give support, and give them care, making sure they have food or other things that they might need, making sure that they are staying in touch, that we know what condition they're in, and that making sure that they have access to medications, making sure that they have things like their glasses or their hearing aids or their their mobility aids that they might have. I know that I wear contacts, and when I wake up in the morning, I don't have my contacts in. The whole world is just harder to deal with until I put my contacts in. And so you can imagine if somebody's glasses got broken or something and they can't see things as clearly, everything is going to seem more stressful and more out of control. The same with not being able to hear as well. So making sure that they have those things that they rely on, and just activating, people around us in the community that we can to, if we need to make a schedule to make sure that somebody's checking in on these elders in the community, and somebody's making sure they got food, and somebody's making sure they got medicine and things like that. Being able to just to make sure that we can reduce the amount of stress that they're feeling from feeling isolated. And for ourselves, when it gets to be too much, because sometimes it might be, we need to know when it's time to reach out and get professional help. Anxiety can be a good thing, and at times, because it helps us to avoid danger, and it gives us the motivation to solve everyday problems. But sometimes it can become so severe and persistent that it interferes with what we're trying to do, whether that's work or school or just coping in general. And depression can cause those feelings of sadness and a loss of interest in doing anything around us. So if those are things that you're experiencing, or you feel yourself experiencing, or you see in someone close to you is starting to experience, then it's so important to be able to reach out and get some sort of professional help. And that might be from an EAP, it might be from a mental health professional, it might be from a spiritual advisor, it might be, any number of people. It could just be that grandma in the community that is the person that always gives advice to everyone. But there's, reaching out and getting help is really important when you recognize those signs. And finally, whoops, went too far. Just sort of finding your inspirations. What is it about this situation that I'm going to take away? What is it that I'm going to turn, how is it I'm going to turn this situation into something that is strong and inspiring? So take a virtual class if you could stand being on the computer some more. I mean, there's all kinds of classes out there and webinars and things that you can learn, completely new things. Experience an online concert or opera or musical or something you've never had the chance to do before. One of the most amazing things I've seen is these people, it was happening a lot in New York City during the worst of the time there, where people were, going out on their balcony and playing an instrument that was just beautiful and something that people might not have ever stopped to listen to before, but we're finding inspiration in that. Or random acts of kindness, like we see in some cities at 7 o'clock every night when the shift changes, for the medical staff, that everybody comes outside and cheers and claps and makes noise. It brings tears to my eyes every time I see something like that, because it so takes us out of ourselves and out of, whatever we might be feeling, just to say, thank you to someone else who might be doing just what they thought they're supposed to do. Learn to dance. Take a dance class, or just dance with music that's on the TV or the radio. Take a virtual tour of a historical site or a museum you've never gotten to visit. Laugh about something. Laugh about something silly. Laugh about something with somebody else. Laugh about something that you remember. Laugh with other people, because that laughter in itself is it's healing, and it helps us to go forward. Provide positive reassurance to the people around us. Every one of us is going to have a bad day or a down day one day, and we just hope that we have someone that can do that for us when we're having that down day. So just try to bring that spark of inspiration to someone else's day. and just choose to see this opportunity, I mean, this experience as an opportunity for something new. Choose not to see it only as the negative things that it has caused, but it could be an opportunity for us to see the world in a new way, to approach the world in a new way, to be with people in a new way, and just appreciate the life that we have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan. There we go. And I'm going to mute my microphone here.
Well, thank you. I want to follow up just quickly on a couple of things Beth said. First, am I coming through okay verbally, orally? Does the sound okay?
You are a little bit far away. If you could lean closer to the microphone and speak a little louder.
I am. How's this?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. So, one of the things I think a lot of us have been visiting is a sense of loss and living in kind of a deficit as a result of COVID. And Beth is talking about a couple of things, a number of things that could really be a way of moving out of that deficit and sense of loss. And one of the things that she talked about is giving something to somebody. And there's an app called Marco Polo. I don't know if you've come across it, but download that thing and you can use it to visit with other folks, to take them on guided tours of your place, listen to them talk about what they're doing in their place, and get a guided tour of how they're working on putting in a garden or whatever the heck it is they're doing. Those kinds of interactions are really important, really important. And we can do the same thing in terms of community. If you've sat through any of the project planning and development trainings that we've done, you've heard us talk about, we're not talking about you as a planner. We're not talking about you as a proposal writer. We're talking about you as a community organizer, someone who's helping build community, And that's what we're going to be talking about really quickly today. One of the things that we need to do, of course, is think about what community you're going to be working in that building process. Is it going to be the geographic community in which you live, or are you thinking about working in a set of that community, the demographic community, elders, single parent families, communities of affiliation, folks that have special interests, or a kind of gathering interest. What kind of community is it that we're going to be working with in doing community development work while we're in this kind of situation? And it is something we in fact can do. We can, and Jenica's going to talk a bit about, with all of the ANA applications are open right now. All of them are open right now. And people are coming in for technical assistance right now. And we're talking about how they can do some work on, still do some work on involving the community in project development. Using a steering committee is one of the ways you can involve the community in project development. Steering committee with representation from the community of interest, that's going to be the beneficiary community of the project, the general community, partners, elected officials, community leaders. Get a steering committee put together and have those folks be the touch points that do outreach to the entities they're representing on the steering committee, going out to those entities virtually and connecting with members of their subsets, getting input from those folks on the project that is being contemplated, how that project could be structured, what the issues are that project needs to be addressing. All that sort of work can still be done. It can be done virtually. You can be doing that kind of work with the members of the steering committee. The members of the steering committee can be doing that work with the subsets of the community and partner organizations that are going to be part of the project that is being contemplated. So keep that piece in place, work on that piece. We can still do community surveys. We can still do community surveys, and we can have, excuse me, we can have some incentives for those surveys. You know, folks who complete the survey, get the survey back to us, they're going to be put into a drawing for fill in the blank. What kinds of things would make people feel really kind of good about having stuff done for them by participating in the survey, for participating in the survey? What kind of rewards would be kind of useful, meaningful, enjoyable for them? So build that kind of community engagement into the work you're doing with community surveys. It's a good starting place for the planning process, and your steering committee can help with the survey distribution and the survey returns. Once you get some ideas back from the community on where we want to go with what kind of issues, break things down into focus group discussions. So put together 2 or 3 focus groups that take those issues and work those issues, identify and prioritize the conditions, the barriers that were identified by the community, develop some priorities on how the community would like to see those barriers dealt with, put together that kind of information so that it can come back to you folks in the planning department or wherever you are in your organization, and that it's information from the community. It's community-based planning that's been going on during this quarantine situation that we've got. We can still reach out, we can still engage people, we can still keep them involved, and that involvement is going to be valuable not just for the project, not just for project development, or not just for community development. It's going to be valuable for engaging folks in that kind of activity, given the situation that we're in right now. Getting people working together is going to be, can be, one of the most beneficial therapeutic kinds of experiences folks can engage in as time passes with the COVID. And then the final piece of the process, we started out getting general information back from surveys. We kind of refined that information through focus group and nominal group process. And then the final piece is we've got some pretty clear stuff now in terms of issues the community's interested in, the kinds of longer term goals the community would like us to pursue in our process, what the problems are standing between the community and those long-term goals, what kind of project goal would be useful, what kind of improved condition would the community like to see as a result of project implementation. Taking that information, taking it to the folks who are key points or would be key points in those kinds of project development discussions, those kinds of community engagement discussions. So if we've come down with a project that involves elders, then we would want to talk to some elders and some folks that work with elders as key informants. If we have come down to a project that's going to deal with younger people, then let's talk to some of those folks. Let's talk to some of the youth. Let's get their ideas about what can be done to reduce alcohol and drug abuse in our teenage population. What can be done to help with virtual school maintenance? How can we help kids keep going in this kind of environment? That might be a part of what a projects built on? I mean, projects can be built on the stuff that this COVID virus has created in our communities, and community-based projects, community-based strategies for dealing with those sorts of barriers and the deficiencies, the strains that the COVID virus has created for us in our communities. So we can build projects that include information, that include project elements that have been created by this current disaster, if that's what you want to call it. Jenica, would you like to talk a little bit about how these pieces can be affected, put into place using virtual tools?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of these are pretty obvious, and some of them both Beth and Dan touched on, but I did want to compile them and put them someplace to reference. They are also in the handout for the resources in your side control panel. So don't feel like you need to jot all these down. If some of these are new to you, they are listed there. So steering committees. Steering committees are really important. As Dan discussed, you can still meet with your steering committee. You can still gather interest in a steering committee through your basic phone tree. Have a phone call with people that you know are interested and have them reach out to their network and so on. You might not have everyone's phone number sitting in front of you at home, but if you have 5 people and those 5 people each have 5 people, you can reach quite a few people through a phone tree. Email communication, as always, that's nothing new. A lot of people are using email communication in their typical work environment. So if you're still at home and have access to your work email, you can definitely tap into email communication ongoing. You can also plan for regular conference calls. So if before you were meeting in person, make all of those in-person meetings a virtual phone call, a conference call. And there's a lot of platforms out there that can do that. Zoom, Google Hangouts are free. A little bit more in depth, GoToMeeting, Adobe Connect, WebEx, Citrix, all of these online platforms allow you to have face-to-face discussions, or as we're doing, just give a presentation and share your desktop so that people can all be on the same page when you're looking at something together. And have those, like I said, on a regular basis. Your steering committee can also help you in the following items: the surveys, the focus groups, and the key informant interviews. So don't feel like you have to take this on all by yourself. Tap into that steering committee who can take on these tasks with you. So for surveys, you may have done questionnaires in the past. They may have been in person if people were coming to your booth at, say, a powwow, for instance. Because those opportunities are not available at the moment, we can go old school. We can send paper surveys. If it's been a while since you've done that, it may be a really easy way to reach out to people that you cannot connect with in person. There's always online survey tools as well. SurveyMonkey and Google Forms offer free services. So you can set up your questionnaire, make them anonymous, and get the responses that you may need to continue with your community building. Other options include basic phone calls. Again, tap into that phone tree and call people, conduct surveys. The difference with that is that it would no longer be anonymous. So you're going to want to keep in mind how sensitive the information is that you are collecting. If you are going to choose to do phone calls with surveys, you're going to want to have a way to track all of that for submission with your application. Having that community-based planning documented through attachments like sign-in sheets is no longer available. So you're going to want to have your phone calls with meeting minutes, agenda item notes, and survey results all recorded. With focus groups, when you're starting to get survey results back and you're starting to delve deeper into those focus group conversations, you're going to want to have a way to get everyone on the same page. Again, webinar platforms, conference calls, and screen sharing platforms like that GoToMeeting, Adobe Connect, WebEx, even Google Hangouts, which is free, has a way to share someone's desktop. So everyone can look at the same document. People can type notes into those platforms and make sure that the conversation is being recorded as well as shared among everyone equally. And of course, key informant interviews. Unfortunately, you can no longer go door to door at the moment, but you can still do that phone call and email communication. So that's about it.
One of the things that we sometimes have a little trouble gauging is how ready is our community to take a look at the stuff that the issues that are being coming out of a community-based planning process, the issues facing the community that we think we've done a pretty good job of documenting. How ready is the community to take a look at dealing with those issues? Colorado State University has done a pretty good job of putting together some strategies for identifying where communities are in terms of readiness to proceed, and some pretty good information on how to help communities move along in that process of readiness. And we've used this readiness scale, stages of community readiness, in a variety of contexts. Used it doing work with domestic violence programs, domestic violence and sexual assault issues. And that's something that communities have difficulty dealing with. Use this readiness strategy scale, readiness identification scale, and readiness strategies implementation operations that are outlined in the Colorado State pamphlet to good effect in those situations. Used it in working with language programs and the readiness there is in a community to start using, to resume using, to build use capacity in the language, not just having it in the classrooms, but actually start using it in the community. Readiness scales there have been really useful, measuring where we are now, where we want to get to, and what strategies we can use to get there. So take a look at this particular tool as a really valuable piece that you can use in doing project development while the COVID is upon us. And I think that's pretty much all we've got in this area. Jen, you want to run through the resources?
Yep, so again, these resources are available in that handout in the side control panel. Just very briefly, the first link here is the SAMHSA website focusing on the coronavirus that Beth had provided. The second resource is the Community Readiness Handbook that Dan just went through. And the third resource is a similar document, is Community Readiness Training for tribes, specific to tribes, but it focuses on suicide prevention. So a different perspective on the same material. The second to last link is the SBA funding for coronavirus relief for small businesses. And the last link is for a website that has several other financial resources focusing on COVID relief. So these are in that handout. Feel free to take a look at them. And again, if you have questions or want some ways to tie these into your application with ANA, we are happy to discuss that as well. So that brings us to our Q&A session. We now have time for questions and answers. If you do have a question, feel free to enter it into the questions box in your side control panel. We're going to give some time for people to enter those. And in the meantime, I'd like to remind everyone that the ANA funding cycle is in full swing. As Dan mentioned, all applications are due July 1st with 2 exceptions. SEDS is due July 15th and SEDS Go is due July 13th. SEDSCO is new this year and aims to build a very basic capacity for those growing organizations in a set of specific organizational areas. So if you are a small developing organization, that may be a good fit for you. If you're interested in applying for SEDSCO, we recommend that you submit a letter of intent to ANA, and they can provide you with contact information that will connect you with your regional TTA center to have TTA staff help you with your application draft. And of course, technical assistance is always available to anyone who reaches out. So do reach out to us. We're happy to review your application, provide you with feedback before you submit it, and answer any questions you may have. So at this time, I do not see any questions, but I'll give a bit more time to those who may have questions and would like to submit them. In the meantime, Dan, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, how can I get unmuted? That's always one of my final thoughts. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing some good work come in, even in the environment that we're faced with right now. Some good work come in from our local partners in program development. I know there's some stuff coming in on language work. I've been doing some TA in that area. I know there's some stuff coming in economic development. I know there's some stuff coming in from tribal colleges. We can keep doing what we do. We can still work in community. We can still work in community. We just do it a little differently. And I promise you, I really do promise you, that if you reach out and work with community members in this process, in the community development process, in the project development process, it will fill up your stomach. You'll feel so much better. I do, at least I do. And I think you will too. So keep on going, keep on working, be safe, be well, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dan. And Beth, did you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Just that it was my pleasure to be here today, and I hope that you can take something from the things that we've talked about to help you and your families and your communities. And I send good thoughts for health and safety for all of you. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. And I'd like to echo those thoughts as well. I hope everyone is safe out there. I want to thank both Dan and Beth for their time and their presentation. We appreciate that you were able to share this information with us. I want to thank our listeners. We did run just a little bit over our hour allotted time slot, but we are so glad that you were able to join us today. If you do have any further questions, as I said before, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Use the handouts that we've provided or follow up with more questions. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Have a great day, everyone.